Hello, friends. Welcome back to another edition of the PCS podcast, the podcast built by the community for the community. I'm one of your co-hosts, Aaron, and with me tonight I have Michael joining in on the fun as always. But more importantly, we have a certain world's top four finisher in our midst, top three, in fact. He got a Pikachu trophy, and we're joined by none other than Jesse Parker again. Jesse, thanks for being here.
Of
Before we
course.
dive into the meta, at Baltimore, congratulations on the one run. We were all rooting for you in the
Thank you very
Discord,
much. Thank
and
you.
you've had a little bit of a whirlwind, kind of all over the social media sphere, and props for you to
I'd
doing
say
that. But
so.
just have you been able to get a little bit like rest and relaxation from Worlds? Obviously, Hawaii is a great place to relax after a top four finish. But just how's your life been since Worlds?
Yeah, it's definitely been a whirlwind for sure. Definitely been very busy, but I feel like I'm managing it well. I'm like trying not to take my foot off the pedal too much leading up to Baltimore, just because, Baltimore. I mean, this month flew by for me, but Baltimore Regionals is exactly a month after Worlds, and it's in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same format. So I'd like to try to ride this wave, like and maybe do well at Baltimore as well, and then like maybe take a little breather because it'll be a new format. Got
Yep.
another month until Louisville regionals. So yeah, I mean it's been crazy. I mean, like I never imagined I would. I mean, obviously I go into Worlds with the goal to win the tournament, but my goal for Worlds was to day two. So to make because I never day two to Worlds before. The closest I got was 5-3 last year in Japan. So to get third was like insane. It was just crazy. It just felt like I couldn't lose. So yeah, it's been
That's so
really
sick.
cool. It's been just kind of been half of my time's been kind of basking in the glory, and the other half of the time's been like still trying to keep my eye on the ball and test for Baltimore because some of my testing partners want to start the season off strong, to get points towards the new season.
Right. And not to bring up, obviously, because you didn't lose. You went 12-0, won your top eight, so even 13-0. And then in game three, I mean, it was wild that he barely mulliganed in games two and three, like absolutely wild. When you did your first deck check and counted those electric generators, what was, I know obviously you couldn't say it on air, but what was going through your brain of oh no, double checking the electric generators and realizing that you priced three?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was rough for sure. Like electric generators are always the last thing that I count, so it took me a while to realize it.
Okay.
But like usually like you're fine even just prizing 2, but prizing the 3 definitely is rough because usually you want that like you want to like naturally find one like off of research or off like opening hand with some
Yep.
mulligans, and then the other one you'll search out. And then as long as like one of those two hit like 2 energy, then like you're okay. But especially with like Squawk ability being able to accelerate energies and just Iron
Yeah.
Thorns is a slower deck, so just
Yeah.
manually attaching every turn is sometimes enough as well. It was hard though because his deck was super aggressive. He had the 4 Pokemon catcher, he had the Prime catcher, so he was targeting down the thing I was attaching energies to almost every time. So
Yeah.
yeah, the electric generator being prized definitely rough. But I had some really good beats early on in that tournament as in Worlds as well. So it all evens out in the end. So yeah, it's definitely rough to get that loss in top four, but I was just happy to make the top four. I wouldn't have been upset, but I would have been a lot more disappointed if I had lost in top eight. That had happened in
Yeah.
top eight than in top four. So I was just happy to get that Pikachu trophy. And yeah, prizing those generators definitely rough, but that's just it is what it is.
Yeah. I interviewed Michael Premarat after NAIC, and we were kind of talking about a season. I'm like, oh, right. I was like, you got top four. And he's like, yeah. He goes, I didn't have to grind. Like, I already
Yeah.
had my invite. So he's like, I just
Yeah.
played whenever I wanted to, when I felt like playing and when the format felt fun. So I'm glad you had that. And I'm,
Yeah, me
obviously
too.
happy to hear
Thanks.
that you're already grinding away for Baltimore, and then I'll get to see you in Louisville because I was able to get a
Oh,
registry
nice.
spot. So
Cool,
yeah,
cool.
I'll get to physically meet you there as well too.
Yeah,
So
that'd be awesome.
Michael, I saw on your Twitter that you headed down to the Georgia college football game with one of your sons.
Yeah, man.
How have you been since last podcast with Dre?
Yeah, pretty solid. I realize how old I'm getting at 34 and making a quick trip like that, dude. Like, we left around noon or 1 o'clock on Friday. It's about a 5.5 hour drive down to Athens, Georgia, from here in Raleigh. So we
Okay.
get there a little later in the evening after multiple pit stops for a 6-year-old, things like that. And then I stay up. I don't know why. I was like, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. But I played Tournament of Doom. I was like, I gotta grind for Baltimore. And one thing led to another, and I just kept going, and I finished 6-2-1 at the Tournament of Doom. I ID'd in round 7 with the Iron Thorns. I was playing Lugia. I ID'd. I was like, you know what? Like, this could go one of two ways. I ID and I play the next game and I win it out, or I play it anyway. So I ID'd. Probably shouldn't
You
have.
ID'd versus an Iron Thorns?
I did. Yeah, they.
What in the world? Why did they do that?
I know it's you. I'd have to find. I took a screenshot of their. They basically spared my soul,
Yeah.
but they ended up. They were undefeated at that point too. So for them, I
Oh,
don't think they really cared.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I ID'd, which was cool. And then the next round, I played a mirror match. I was playing Lugia, and they just hit it. They had it all. They literally did. And so I lost that. And so I finished 6-2-1, and I ended up going from like I was at table 1, going into table or round 7, and then I ended up finishing like 14th, 15th, 16th, somewhere around there. So I got to
yeah.
go to bed early or earlier. It was still like 2 o'clock in the morning, and then we woke up the next morning and stayed outside in 90-degree Georgia heat, and then I drove home that night. So that was a long day. And then Sunday night came home and did our little PCS challenge that we're doing. I think we'll chat through later. Played
Yeah.
Brett. He was on Sablezard. I ran Lugia again. I went 2-0 there. So feeling pretty high on Lugia, flying high. I just hope I don't hit Jesse and crew if Jesse happens to be on the Dawn again. But it's been my deck for a long time. It's done the best for me, and I was back and forth between like Ancient Box or Bolt, and I just got to send it. I don't need to overthink it. So, yeah, so that's my week. Been good. Poke, lots of good football. Georgia won. Georgia's great as always. I say it every time. It's great to be a fan of the best football team in college football. So, pretty nice. Yeah, but yeah, that was my week, man. How about yours? I know football is in full swing for you as well.
Yeah, it was a fairly busy week. Obviously, it was nice to kind of have only like a 4-day work week, but it kind of felt like 5 days in those 4 days after Monday recording. It was beautiful weather here and I was starting to get warmer again, but we kind of hit like an early fall where it gets down into the 50s, and then during the day like it's up to 70s, and like that is weather peak weather for us here in Iowa. It's just so beautiful out. So spent a lot of outdoors time. And then, yeah, football was going through. It played in our PCS thing as well, too, and played Dialga V-Star. But I needed to get a dub because I've been 0-3, so I've kind of been playing kind of cheese decks a little bit. So he was playing, he wanted to do webcam, so I was like, perfect. And I was like, we'll do it. And he's going to run Toad Scroll. That's what he's played with a whole lot. So played Andrew, and I was like, all right, I'm going to give you the hardest matchup. But I was like, I have to get a win, because if I don't get a win during this season challenge, I'm going to kick myself out of the pod. So needed that. So we talked through matchups and stuff like that. But yeah, he just sees, a lot of cards as basically turbo Toad Scroll. So it's kind of interesting. But, and then, yeah, football, don't really want to talk about the Saturday game. That's why my voice is a little bit harsh. But and then yesterday, thankfully, the NFL team Miami was able to make a comeback after not looking very good at all in the first half. So, but we'll see. But I'm excited for our first regional of the season. Same format as Worlds. You both will get to be there, as well as a few other obviously big names. So I'm really excited to see where things shake out, and that's what obviously our topic is this evening. And if you want to bring up, we have our courtesy kind of the meta over the last 2 weeks of Justin Basil. He was just recently on the Lake Rage podcast and kind of talked about his website, but kind of have a meta tier list here that we have of going through. And probably kind of one of the first questions that I have for you, Jesse, is just kind of like, you're looking through this. We've kind of seen a little bit of a rise, a resurgence, I should say, of Charizard EX and Ancient Box. Obviously, those are 1 and 2 in the list the last 2 weeks. Where do you kind of feel like, in terms of Worlds being the top players? I think, what was the official number that you guys had? Was it about like 1,100? Did it go over 1,000
Yeah, it was a
rosters?
little over. It was a little over 1,100,
Okay.
close to 1,200. So, obviously the biggest worlds yet. It kind of looks funny on Limitless, or on the Limitless tournament page, because if you look at like all the worlds, like this one's 1,200, then all the rest are like 200 or
Yeah.
less. But that's not
Yeah.
exactly true, because this world was unique in that day 1 and day 2 were like the same tournament, like a regional,
Yeah.
whereas like in the past, day 2 is like a completely separate tournament. So it's really about just like slightly above what it was last year, and because the people who made day 2 was like similar to last year, so it's not actually like that much bigger than previous worlds. but it is like something where like you definitely needed to have a hotter run because in the past in day 2 you could just get like you could just go like 4-0 or 5-0 and you'd be like in top 8 contention, but in this world it's like you couldn't drop more than like one, maybe two games you were in on like the asymmetrical cut to play in a top 8. So yeah, it's definitely like you needed definitely to run hotter at this world. So I don't know if that means it was harder than previous worlds, but I think so because like there's a lot of people who would just get auto day 2 invites and they would not have to play half of the tournament. So that I
Mhm.
feel like now everybody's kind of on equal footing. You know, they get a round 1 bye, which is an advantage, I suppose. But in the grand scheme of things, they're on a lot more equal footing with the rest of the players.
Yeah, they kind of ran it more similar to like what you'll have in Baltimore, where it's a regional, right? Where your day
Yeah,
one
very much. Yeah.
day
Yeah.
one results greatly affect how you're going to finish up in the tournament. So getting off to a fast start, and obviously immediately after Worlds, the ladder was filled with your list, and then the runner-up list of so there was a lot of Turbo Roy Moon and Turbo Maridon. Where do you feel like I guess with we have over 3,000 people registered juniors through masters. Do you still see like to me it felt, and maybe I was I wasn't there, but like just looking at it, you have the top players in the world playing, and it felt like Reggie Drago getting to that 25%. It felt like a lot went with like a safe pick because of Reggie Drago probably being the best deck in format right now, of being able to have all those options. Do you feel like the meta kind of disperses a little bit now when there's going to be so basically well over double amount of the masters?
Yeah, I mean, with a regional, like with worlds, it's a little more condensed because obviously it is like the best players. So like you'll be at a lot more straightforward. Maybe only like not as many decks you have to account for. Like I guess some people didn't know, but Reggie Drago is one of, if not the best deck going in the tournament. I didn't expect it to get up to 25%. I was thinking it would be
Right.
more like 20, but I
Yeah,
did still expect it to be the most popular deck. Going into in the first day and yeah yeah, Reggie Drago is just crazy. It it's just like it's just a super versatile deck. But I think going into regionals, like it's a lot more open. I always say with these like 3,000 close to 3,000 person regionals, like you could hit like a different deck every single round. Maybe you hit
yeah,
like Reggie Drago twice, but then you'll hit like everything else. So like you really just have to play something that's, I mean, proven, something you're comfortable with, and you just like you have to expect to play against anything. So it's really
Yeah.
hard to make these meta calls at these big regionals. It's like almost impossible, honestly. I mean, you can make an idea like I think most people understand like okay, Ancient Box might be a little more popular. Charizard maybe a little more popular because of Ancient Box being more popular, but
yeah,
it's a constantly revolving circle. And then like Lugia is good against those decks, and then Reggie Drago is kind of just pretty good against everything. So
Mhm.
I still think Reggie Drago will be the most popular deck, just because it's just really strong. It's really versatile. There's no like major weaknesses. It's like biggest weakness is like the big basic turbo decks. So
yeah,
like Raging Bull, Miraidon, it can struggle in Roaring Moon. But then I think some people might be too afraid to play those because of Ancient Box. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
it's definitely like way more going to be wide open for regional. I think that's just how it'll always be from now on with how many people are playing at these. So I
sure,
think yeah, it's almost near impossible to like make a meta call, especially early in the day. I think like once you start winning rounds, like you'll end up playing against the better players, and then you'll end up playing against more Dragos, more Charizards, more Lugias. But early
Right.
on, you could definitely play against anything, like
yeah.
Toad Scroll or something crazy like that.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you kind of led me right into the next question of what are the kind of the top five decks? We'll do a tier list and everything like that. But kind of what do you feel like the top five decks that you're prepping to face the most with whatever archetype that you're going to be playing this weekend?
Number one would be Reggie Drago. Number two would be Lugia. Number three, Charizard. Number four, I would say it's kind of a toss up. Number four, I guess I would say, I guess Raging Bolt. But I think the combination, I think Raging Bolt and Roaring Moon, Turbo Roaring Moon will be really close.
Sure.
And then I think number seven or number six would be I think Ancient Box could creep up in the number 6 spot. Maybe Miraidon, but I'm not too sure. I think a lot of people realize that it's maybe a little worse positioned for this event than it was for Worlds. But yeah, I could see Ancient Box taking that 6th spot for sure.
Okay.
So I would say like those top 5, 6 decks are kind of what you'd want to be preparing for.
Okay, that feels right. We actually one of the other members that was going to Baltimore as well. I made a bet with him. He went to Virginia Tech, and I was telling him I was like, it seems like the last 2 weeks specifically, Ancient Box has kind of been all the rage, and it might have peaked a little bit too early. So we made it just a fun bet of. I said it will get over 10%, maybe 10 exactly. But we made a joke, and then if it doesn't get over it, I have to wear a Virginia Tech shirt to the one of the days at Louisville Regional. And I was like,
Oh
that's
man.
okay. I could wear a far I have no attachment to Virginia Tech. If you would have said our in-state rival here in Iowa, I'd have been like, nope, that's
Yeah,
no
no
go.
way.
Like I will never touch anything of that college. So yeah, it should be go through. So yeah, I think you're exactly right with those, and as you said, with kind of the rise of Charizard, Miraida might not be in the exact same position it was, because I think a lot besides Tord, but a lot of Charizard players were very scared, I think, to play that at Worlds because of that. But I think as kind of certain things come around, like Charizard can be in a position with the right master running the list and everything like that. So yeah, I think you kind of hit, or at least where my brain's at, of kind of where the top 5 decks are that we might see, or 6, I should say. Michael, do you have our
Yeah.
next question?
Yeah, yeah, it's been interesting to see, and I think you've kind of already alluded to a lot of it too. Like as we move from Worlds into our first regional of the new season, it's the meta. I think the meta has been dispersed quite a bit. Whereas like obviously at Worlds, the best players are playing the best deck. You go into a regional, you're gonna have a lot of maybe even first time regional attendees playing the turbo decks. So tell us like how are you like mentally preparing for? And you've kind of given us a little bit towards that. Like, how are you mentally preparing to face some of those earlier rounds against potential jank decks or a Toad Scroll or I don't know the baby Blood Moon or Selena? Like, how do you work through that as a player to try to figure out like I've got to obviously focus on these top decks and what I expect to be the top meta decks here, but also like I got to get to that point and I've got to get past the junk at the beginning, if you will, too. So what goes into that mentally? How do you
Yeah.
work through that?
That's always been the big struggle with these regionals is like you want to target like the decks you feel like the good players are going to play. Like in the past, like Gardevoir's kind of been that deck where like I want to play, I'll just use Miraidon. Like I want to play Miraidon because it's really good against these Gardevoir decks.
Right.
Turbo Iron Hands could just run them over. And I know a lot of the best players will be playing Gardevoir. Like it was my number 1 pick going into NAIC. But then you also have to be like, okay, well, to make it to those players, you have to beat like you have to go through like the muck, at the beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
the muck could be Raging Bolts or Charizards, and those are
Right.
going to be really hard for like a Miraidon to beat, for example. But
Yeah.
I think I kind of just say like I'm just going to rely on my ability as a player to like win some bad matchups.
Hmm.
If I can just get through like one Raging Bolt, a Raging Bolt who maybe makes a suboptimal play or maybe draws bad, I can maybe cheese a win against them. And
Yeah.
then if I can do that, then I can maybe just ride the wave up of like all the Gardevoirs and Lugias and just farm those decks. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like a hard approach. Like you don't want to completely disrespect like the early decks. Like you don't want to say you don't want to like if your deck takes like an auto loss to Charizard, then like that would probably be pretty bad for sure. Like you want to at
Right.
least have like something that can or maybe like have like one tech in your deck that could like give you a slight edge against Bolt, like maybe playing like a Vitality Band and Rhydon, for example,
Yeah.
could maybe give you the edge you need to beat it in the early rounds. Uh, but yeah, you kind of just have to. I still think it's good to like I like to try to counter like what the good players are going to play. So I
Right.
think to me that's like probably still Reggie Drago. I think a lot of them will still play that because it's
Yeah.
the same meta as Worlds. I don't think a lot of people will want to swap off the deck they've tested so much for Worlds. They might change a couple cards, but yeah, that's what I go with. But it's hard. You almost just gotta like. My group has always said this. You kind of just have to pick your favorite deck and just run with it. Like
Yeah.
pick your favorite color.
Yeah.
Uh, and just run with it. And yeah, as long as the deck isn't like completely trash, and 2, like you have a good list, and 3, like you're
Right.
comfortable with the deck and can play it like up reasonably well, then I think
Yeah.
that's just go with that, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. In that same vein though, like right, like the earlier rounds of a regional sometimes can feel like a league cup in a lot of ways too, where you really just don't know what to expect. But is there a deck that's like kind of sneaky that you and your testing group kind of think might fly under the radar just a bit, or at least fly under a lot of people's radars that might actually have a decent run? Like if we look at top eight
Um,
on Sunday of this week, like are we going to be surprised by something?
I don't really think so. I mean, I think maybe like I could see like a Chen Pao maybe making a deep run, someone who's good with that deck. 'Cause I think like Charizard are starting to get more like obviously are horrible against Ancient Box, but if you can just dodge that, I think
Right.
as long as you go first, like you have a you have a really easy time with Charizard. You can definitely beat Drago as long as you go first. You can beat Raging Bolt. Gardevoir is pretty good. Lugia is pretty solid too. So I think I can see Chien-Pao make a deep run. I also think that Thorns is still a really good deck. I think people might just be writing that off. So I could see a Thorns doing really, really well again because everybody's like, oh, no one expects people to play the winning deck
Yeah.
because it'll be countered. But at the same time, again, I keep bringing up Ancient Boxes. Like that's a deck that like is really good against Thorns. And I think just
Yeah.
people like maybe Lugia is saying that might play a Flutter Mane or something could be
Yeah.
bad to attack against it. But I would say I can't think of anything like super off wall that I could see doing well. I mean, I think honestly anything's possible, but I could see
Right.
maybe a Thorns just like making it really far because people just like continue to maybe disrespect or just not account for the deck and just play like run up with Lugia, assuming no one's gonna play Iron Thorns again.
Yeah. I
It
mean,
is wild that the world's winning deck is still kind of an afterthought. Just it's not a meme anymore because it won the hardware, but it is kind of just wild that after meta or after worlds like it's there and it's just kind of is like someone really gonna roll up with it. I agree
Yeah, it's
that
just a good deck, just a good
yeah,
deck.
like if the meta's right for it and you hit the matchups you're really strong against,
yeah.
and you're able to kind of start to accumulate those prizes before they're one of cancel clone or they're able to push something to the active to at least get their abilities back. And then like the only other one is like we kind of saw some golden goes kind of pop up, which is what you played at NAIC this year. We
Yeah.
kind of saw a few of them make to day two, but they kind of sputtered out late.
Yeah,
But
Goldengo's a weird one for sure. I feel
yeah,
like
it's
I
wild.
think the Goldengo will forever live in that like kind of good
It's
like best worst deck. Like
yeah,
I don't consider it like one of the best decks obviously, but it is something that I think is good enough that I decided to play it for a big tournament. So
Yeah.
yeah,
but I think one of its biggest strengths was that it was really good against Gardevoir, and Gardevoir is kind of like non-existent now.
yeah.
And that's
It's
another deck
wild.
I could see maybe making a deep run. But honestly, I don't know. I honestly don't have a lot of faith in Gardevoir as an archetype. I've never really liked it, and I also think that um
Yeah.
it's just not well positioned really at all. So but I think if like a really good Gardevoir player picked it up, I obviously they could make a deep run. Same with Chimpao. Like Lucas Zing, for example,
Yep.
with
Right. Right.
Chimpao, like Chen Pao is just horribly positioned, but he just said, I played this deck the most of any deck, and I'm just gonna win the coin flip every game. And that's
Yeah.
basically what happened. I mean, making a top 16. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. I did not have that on my bingo card for Worlds. Was
Yeah.
a Chen Pao in top 16,
No.
nor a Golden Go. I think there was.
Yeah.
I know there was one
There
close
was
to
like
top
two or three
32.
in
Yeah.
top
There's a
64,
couple.
and they were both
Yeah, I think
brothers, which is kind of funny.
yeah, from Seattle. And then like for like Gardevoir 2, it's just wild from it dominating 6 of the top 8 at NAIC and then just completely just falling off the face
Yeah.
of the earth.
There's like
But
one in top 16, but that's it.
yeah, but like if you have like Cal Connor, right, who's a notorious Gardevoir player, and
Yeah.
then there's some other Americans that can play it, and we'll see, I guess, if anyone comes from overseas to play it. But it just I think now too, especially if Ancient Box does get to that close to 10%, hopefully, that just kind of has a decent matchup in there. It just kind of, like I said,
For sure.
depends on those Ionos if you get into your Sadas to be able to continue to chain
Or
attacks. So
reset stamp, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Or
Yeah.
unfair stamp.
Unfair stamp, yeah, I still call it
Yeah.
reset stamp as well too from time
The
to time.
GLC
GLC,
brain. Your
yeah,
GLC
GLC
Yeah.
brain.
brain is still play that in
I feel
colorless.
you.
Yeah, yeah, yep. Well, good. Well, and then with the change, since you obviously kind of played or you did play at Worlds, and it kind of tweaked it a little bit there. With this, with their changes for this season, talking about the number of Swiss rounds and what to look like. For this event, obviously, we will have the full nine rounds for day one. but obviously the big change of going from 19 points to 21 points. Um, in your experience, depending, obviously on your deck selection and everything, is how soon are you likely to scoop in that game one to try to still finish a best of three, depending like if you feel like the matchup's close and then they're able to change something and all of a sudden you're like, man, I this is not going to be a very high chance for me to come back and make it a dub in your situation. How what's kind of the time frame of that clock ticking? If you're like, let's just scoop and go to game two, I'll go first because that's when my deck is the best, just so you can try to get those dubs and avoid those ties. Even though you can get three specific ties, you just need 6 wins to go with that, which is an undefeated record. What's your thought process of just trying to get to that magic number of 21 points and beyond?
Well, I mean, learning how to scoop is one of the hardest skills to learn for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, it could because you don't want to like scoop games that like you might have a decent chance of winning, but yeah, it's hard. I mean, I haven't really had that issue too much just because like I've generally been playing these like turbo, these really fast decks that'll just finish games no matter what,
Mm-hmm.
finish the best of three no matter what. But I've definitely have had some like especially at World some games against Lugia that ended up going pretty long because they were setting up really quickly and the games just ended up going long for whatever reason. And I definitely had some games where like I like knew like in game one, like they went first and got turn two Ultra Ball double Arc Yaps, and I just knew that they were gonna win the prize exchange through legacy energy.
Yeah.
And like I had a route to win, but I would have needed to like chain boss like multiple times, which my Luminion was prize, so I was like, I don't think this is gonna happen. So I did just immediately scoop because I'm like, okay, especially when it's a good matchup, like you're like,
Sure,
I
sure.
want to make sure we finish this series. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna give myself as much time in game two and three as possible. And I'm glad I did because I ended up winning in like turn three of time in game three. So it was really, really close. So but yeah, you really just have to, I mean, it's just about knowing your deck and just being a better like you just develop that skill as you play. Like you just
Sure.
need to know like be able to read game states, and that's just something that is I wouldn't worry about too much as like a newer player, but like you definitely want to be conscious of it. And yeah, again, like I said, it's like one of the hardest skills to learn. But I generally will like I don't wear a watch usually, but I usually will like at the end of like every turn, I will just like take a little peek at the clock, or I
Yeah.
will just like I probably asked the judge like 3 or 4 times during my game, like what how much time's left, because now you're allowed to ask the judges.
Yeah.
So I will just like because there's always judges. I'll be like, Judge, how much time? And then if we're still in game one and he says like 28 minutes, I'm like, all right, let's just then that'll maybe influence my decision a little bit. I would recommend wearing a watch and just keeping track of time, but I'm lazy, so but yeah, yeah, it's a really hard skill to learn for sure. And it's not really a clear cut answer to that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and it entirely depends of your deck archetype as well too.
Yeah.
So like I played Diaga V Star to NAIC and just kind of got into that. The first 4 rounds had 3 ties and was like, oh cool. Like I just then had a loss. I was like, well, my tournament's over, but let's see. And then I was able to at
Yeah.
least uh, win 4 straight to kind of try to make that comeback late to at
Okay.
least get close to 18 points and say I almost made it. But with that deck specifically too, I had 3 different games as well too, where I was down 2 to 6 in prizes, but with being able to take another turn
Oh
and being
yeah, you
able
make
to
some
kind of just
crazy comebacks with that
yeah. So
actually
I
for
won
sure.
3 games when I was down 2-6, and it's just probably some of those other ones where once because of the potential to hit as I did this week, I hit a 2 metal makers with 8 energy, and I was like, well, that's cool because that like never happens in real life. So it's one of those where like kind of depending on those because you're obviously a lot of energy as yourself. Those are an archetype that you like. Is like if you can just flood in fourths, like actually I can make this a pretty straight comeback because they just don't have a prize to come back and knock
Yeah,
out a 280
Dialga's
points. So
Dialga's a hard one. Like same with Gardevoir, because like
Right.
yeah,
you're naturally playing from behind. So like
Yeah.
with a deck like not so much Dialga, because I feel like you can finish games somewhat quick, but with Gardevoir, like you kind of just have to like accept they're gonna be playing like a really long game one and then just like go to time on game two, or like have like win a long game one and then you have a somewhat some optimal start in game two and you just immediately go straight to game three and then you just try to win that like two
yeah,
games, go like 2-0 basically. And but yeah, it's I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, it just
Scooping, just
depends on like
scooping.
the
Yeah, yeah,
just depends on what deck you're playing, and obviously like, with this new format, like ties are even worse now. So you really, I mean, it's all about
Yeah.
like being able to play your deck quickly. Like it's people maybe focus too much on like the type of deck they're playing. It can be a single price deck. Like Ancient Box can take a little longer, but Ancient Box can finish like can 100% finish 3 games. You just like have to be you just have to be comfortable with your deck, and you have to be able to play quickly.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
and the quicker you play, obviously you don't want to play too quick where you're making misplays, but
Sure.
the
Sure.
quicker you play, the less it's important to if your opponent maybe is playing a little bit slower. The less that matters. Like if my deck, like I'll take a really long time on my first search. As long as I can, maybe like sometimes close to a minute. But then the rest of the game, I'm like playing like really, really quickly to like make up
Yeah.
for it. So like I feel like you just gotta find your flow. And again, that comes with like experience and just comes with like how comfortable maybe you are with that deck.
yeah. Here, here. In terms of playing fast and going through that, I think that's something that I've been just conscious of Louisville is just when to scoop in the appropriate time, right? Because you don't want to really scoop if like unless like I have to hit this one specific card or this sequence of cards on this turn in order to start to maybe swing the comeback into more of a
Yeah, you wanna give
50-50
yourself
outcome.
that,
But
like, at
yeah,
least, like, certain times, like, say, like, I'm thinking of scooping, I at least, like, wanna see, like, what my top deck is to see if, like,
Right.
maybe this top deck and then if I, like I'm like, "Okay, if I don't get, like, a draw supporter or, like, a way to gust off this top deck, then I'll immediately scoop." Like, at least give yourself that. So, like, again, it's like a skill you have to learn. You have to, like, give yourself, like, if you feel like you can hit it, like, try to hit the crazy like, maybe if you're like, "Okay, I need to Iono into Ultra Ball double Ultra Ball or Iono into Ultra Ball double Archeops." It's gonna be really hard to do, but let me at least give myself the chance to do that. And if I don't, then scoop and go next. So
yeah.
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 Well, I appreciate that insight, and I think Michael, you have our tier list. We're going to do a live tier list here
Yeah.
with
Yes.
Jesse and Michael, who will be in attendance at Baltimore, and kind of see where things going on. And obviously, the people probably want to hear more so what Jesse thinks than us two. But we figured we do this to kind of see before the goodbyes and everything like that to go through. So
Yeah.
with that first, Michael, what deck do you have queued up
Yeah.
first?
Yeah, so just a quick shout out to our listeners who aren't on YouTube or watching this on Spotify. This will be up. We'll make sure to post our tier list on our socials as well, so you can see it there. And if you're in the PCS Discord, we'll make sure to follow up there too. So this is all new to us, but yeah, I've enjoyed watching these. And shout out to one of my local homies. They are the creator of Trainer Hill. I will not say their name because I think sometimes they like to be unanimous here, but incredible resource that we have here. Awesome
Yeah,
opportunity to
Yeah, I use
create this
Trainer
tier
Hill
list
a lot as well. So
all
yeah.
the time. Yeah, it's awesome. It's fun to get to have some insight, some insider knowledge into everything that's coming for Trainer Hill too. So I find that very fortunate. But yeah, so Jesse, let's obviously we've queued up, and obviously this is some of the top decks that according to Trainer Hill data. So a lot of it comes obviously from what is happening on Limitless. So I think some of these may or may not be as relevant to uh, Baltimore, but let's start with Charizard. We've seen a little bit of a resurgence in Charizard lately. It's just the natural ebb and flow of the meta. I think a lot of Charizard players at first were a little hesitant or a little scared of the board wipes, but I think I've got a couple buddies locally who are sending Charizard and they feel really confident, even in a pretty hostile meta for it, and have done really well locally too. So where do you think Charizard's going to end up in
Um,
terms of
I would
tiers?
I would say that like maybe the top of A is where I'd put it.
Okay,
It's obviously a very strong deck. I think for Worlds for me it was like a mid to low B tier, but I think it definitely has gotten a little bit better because people have kind of figured out like the techs to have a fine, not good, but fine Regidrago matchup.
sure.
Like either playing the Rabska or either playing Hero's Cape. Hero's Cape is
Mm-hmm.
like a really big swing card in that matchup because it makes
Yeah.
it so Ogre Pond can't even one shot you with 4 energy, like
They
they
could
would need
have
yeah,
5.
5.
So they
Yeah.
basically just can't. And then Reggie Dragos are playing like a one of jamming tower to kind of counter that. But I think you really put the ball in the Drago player's court by playing that. I also think you're
Mhm.
just good into a lot of the big basic turbo decks, which are kind of everywhere. You're good into Ancient Box. And I think for me, like where the deck lacks is maybe I still think Reggie Drago matchup is still even at best, if not still unfavorable, even with those techs, just
Yeah.
because of how fast they can rush you down. And
mhm,
sometimes just going first with Charizard is just miserable, like when you have to go first. because you're still a stage 2 deck at the end of the day. So yeah, I would place it at like high A. I would definitely see it being like maybe the second most popular deck at Worlds for sure.
Okay. Do you have a percentage in mind? Like if we were to see that
Uh
top of day one, what do you think it's going to come in at?
maybe 14%,
Okay.
I would say.
Cool. Cool. So next up, we'll skip over these for now. Let's talk about Regidrago. Obviously, it's name dropped quite a bit in this first deck. Do we think it's still S tier? Do we think it's a little bit more even now? Do we drop it back down to A? What are your
Yeah, I
thoughts
think
there?
Drago is the only S tier deck right now. I don't think
Okay.
it's that far above. I think it actually is kind of close to where I think it is kind of creeping up to where Lugia was when Lugia was like extremely dominant.
Mhm.
I just think it doesn't like have like any like truly bad matchups. I think like
Right.
maybe it's one like very hard like a pretty unfavorable matchup is like Turbo Roaring Moon. But other
Mhm.
than that, I feel like it has a pretty good route against like everything. It's despite what some people might say, it is like a pretty consistent deck.
Yeah.
You have a lot of options, a lot of different ways you can play it. A lot of little techs you can include, but it just is like the most well-rounded deck. You can finish your games pretty quickly. The Curum is just an insanely powerful option to
Right.
have against both evolving decks and stage 2 decks that have a lot of low HP like EXs and Vs. So I'd say Regidrago's still like that deck. I don't think it'll be as popular at Worlds because Worlds was like a lot more condensed, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But I could still see it being like I would say like a 20% deck for sure.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
then,
been it's yeah, I think it's still in a good position. I think it's especially with that is like you just have such a defined like to me it's always like the last four cards of that deck is like where you change things, so it's like
For
do
sure.
they change something in, like you said, the jamming tower, like even depending on how afraid you are of the big basics like a league headquarters, sneaking that in, especially where they can't change something in, and you play one of your ionos, it just I think it's still in a good, and as you said, Jesse, just with its matchups being so like widespread where it's not just you know a lot of the meta decks where it has a bad matchup is just no, it's kind of good into everything. So I still feel like even you know the local players or people that weren't at Worlds still feel like okay, well this kind of was four of the top eight at Worlds. I want to play this as well too because it is fun, right? You're just chewing through your deck and you're able to make some pretty cool plays with Kirim and Dragapult and everything else.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to argue against the deck overall. You just don't have like a whole lot of weaknesses, and you just kind of like have you can just I mean being able to use like these one of techs more than one time, like
Yeah,
Temple against Lugia, you could like if you can like save your V Star power, play down Temple, and then they
yeah,
remove it, and then you V Star get Temple back, like
yeah,
stuff like that can like I think there's a lot of skill expression with the deck too, with
yeah.
using your V Star power at the right time and what to grab off of it. So yeah, I definitely think it's still like that deck for sure that you want to be practicing against.
Yep.
yeah. All right, cool. Moving on, kind of the counter to the main deck, or the counters, I should say. I think Dre had a really fun tweet earlier this week, or maybe it was last week. So when I think of like Raging Bolt, Ancient Box, Turbo Roaring Moon, let's start there. Where would you put all three of those? I think you mentioned Turbo Roaring Moon was probably the one of the worst matchups for Reggie Drago, but
Yeah, for sure.
where would we put all these at?
I would put Roaring Moon at about let's see. I mean, I think the fact that it's like out of the big basic decks, I think it's the best against Charizard ever, like slightly. And Drago, just because you have that way of
Yeah.
just deleting their active. Like with
Yeah.
Hmm.
Raging Bolt, like you have like better number. Like it is technically like the stronger deck, like in a vacuum. But Moon just is like you have the free retreat pivot with the Peck Run. You have that delete
Yep.
button.
Yep.
You have a good single prize attacker. You have like unlike Raging Bolt, like you have Sada and Dark Patch. So like you
Yeah.
have like you can play Judge. You don't always have to be playing Asada every turn. So that's what
Yeah.
makes me really like the deck. But I would still say Roaring Moon is going to be. At first, I thought right afterwards, I was like, oh man, this is going to be like the second most popular deck. People love Roaring Moon, but I
Right.
Yeah.
would still put it at like a I would still put it in A. I think it
You would
is.
put it in.
It's
Okay.
hard.
I know it's like low
Uh,
A, high B to me is kind of where I envision
I
it
would.
being.
I guess you can say high B. That's fine.
Yeah.
Because I there's maybe only like one other deck I would want to put in A. So we can
Hmm.
go ahead and put it in B.
Okay.
Saying like S tier is like the BDIF,
Right.
and then
Right.
A is like the top, and then B is like right below it. So I
Yeah,
would say Turbo Roaring Moon would be like a eight, like maybe a 7% deck. Seven.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I would
Uh,
say Raging Bolt. Oh, you want to say
no,
something about?
you're good. You're good. I was
Okay.
gonna lead into Raging Bolt. You think around the same,
Yeah.
being another big turbo
Yeah,
deck?
I would say 7%.
Okay.
Same deal. Like I could see those being right next to each other. And then I guess like I would say like maybe the other big basic deck would be Miraidon actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um
You're gonna put
Miraidon
it
I
in B, not S
definitely
tier.
I would put it at the bottom of B. The bottom of B. Yeah, BDIF. Yep.
That's right.
Put it at the top.
The Jesse
But
BDIF.
maybe for Worlds, I honestly would put it like where Charizard is right now. But
Yeah.
for this event, I think it's slightly worse positioned. I think I mentioned earlier just the rise in Ancient Box and Charizard, even ever so slightly. It's just not
Yeah.
what you want to see. Charizard's the main one. Ancient Box is not that bad of a matchup in my opinion, especially if you tech for it with like
Right.
Iono or Vitality Band. Like it's not that bad.
Disruption is
And
huge.
like
Yeah.
yeah, Ancient Box is just kind of have some really slow starts. So Miraidon being that like aggressive deck similar to Turbo Moon, as
Yeah.
well as being able to take 2 prizes at least once during the game, is like
Mm-hmm.
puts on a lot of pressure on Ancient Box and basically means like if you can get a quick KO, they don't return KO you back, and then you Iron Hands for 2, you can kind of just like win the prize race from there, and there's nothing they can do about it as long as like you get your attacker set up.
Mm-hmm.
But I would still say Miraidon. I don't think it'll make the graphic. I think it'll
Yeah.
be uh I don't
Two,
know,
three
like
percent.
4%,
Okay.
Yeah.
3-4% maybe.
We'll
I'd
call
say
it
4
4.
maybe.
Yeah, we'll call it 4. Okay.
Probably the only people playing are the ones who attended the master class. And
That's right.
And we
maybe
thank
me,
them
and
for
maybe me.
That's
attending
right.
the Marina.
Yep.
Yeah, we thank them for attending that master class.
I'm
Yeah.
okay with Miraidon being down there. But let's check
Yeah.
Ancient Box real quick. That's definitely been somewhat of a surprise, and we've seen it kind of evolve from what Diego is playing with, like a 2 prizer list, and we've seen some come back. Would you say it's A or B tier? Do you think it's the only other A tier that you mentioned, or is it
No, I
B?
don't think so. I think it is
Okay.
still a B tier deck, but I think it is like the top of B tier for sure.
Okay.
Like it's the best B tier deck.
Yeah.
Because it's just really well positioned right now. I mean, if you look at like the decks that did well at Worlds, like Reggie Drago, I think is really close. I would say it's like about 50-50. But the fact that there's a single prize deck that can compete with Reggie Drago is really good. Because you
As
think of
well,
like some
yeah.
other single prize decks, like Gardevoir is kind of a single prize deck. That deck can struggle pretty hard because they always have that Kyurem, that Cologne, Gus Cologne Kyurem threat. Like at any point in the game, they can
Right.
always do that.
Exactly.
Ancient Box, you don't have to worry about that. And if you ramp up really quickly, have a strong start, you can definitely just like you can get up to 280 fairly easily, especially
Mhm.
since a lot of people aren't playing Gudra. That's like really good for you as well.
Yeah.
So there might be one point in the game where Drago can take a bonus prize, but basically like it's just it is really close. There are certain things they can do, but I would say, and then as well as you just being really strong into these decks that are trying to counter Reggie Drago, like the
Right.
big basic decks like Raging Bolt and Turbo Moon, and even
Exactly.
Miraidon, they're all like pretty decently favorable matchups. As long as you can get past those like awkward early turns, which is why I don't like the deck, and I think that is the reason why it would never go in ever. I think it would never go above A tier unless they came out with some new card that made it broken.
Yeah.
Um, just because the deck inherently just has like that like pile energy for sure. So yeah, I think that is going to hold it back from being like one of the best decks, but it is as good as well positioned now as it's ever been for sure. So I would put
Mhm.
that. I think that'll be like number 6 on the graphic. I would say
Okay.
that maybe be like like 6%,
Interesting.
like maybe like 6. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
still say Turbo Moon and Raging
Right.
Bolt are going to be more popular. I
But
mean, I
not
wouldn't be
as strong.
surprised if Ancient Box overtook those, but I just,
Yeah.
in my opinion, I think people are going to favor, especially for a regional setting where
Yeah. Yeah.
want to finish your games. I think people are going to be more apt to play one of those big basic turbo decks.
Yeah, I think it's a good call because I know the online meta, we've seen a lot of ancient box success, but I would argue sometimes the online meta has more competitive players than like your league cups or like a bigger
Well, that
regional
and it's just
too. So
easier to play in an online setting. Like you can
yeah,
Yeah.
click your Roaring Moon and it tells you how much damage. Like when you're
that's
playing in
true.
real life,
You got to
you
count
have
every
to
single
you'll
time.
spend you and your opponent will probably
Yeah,
spend a total of like 3 or 4 minutes just counting the ancient
yeah,
cards. Like
yeah.
and that eats
Seriously.
up the clock big time. And if you're like all like on the ball, like keeping track of it with your like D20 dice, like
Right,
your
right.
opponent is still going to be like, oh, let me just make sure,
Let me count it.
obviously like they're allowed,
Yeah,
but it just can eat up a lot of time. And yeah, that, I mean, but if you're good with I mean, you can definitely finish 3 games. You just really got to be, because it like by like turn 3 or 4 you can just start taking like big one hit KOs. So
Yeah.
it
yeah.
definitely is a strong deck for sure.
Cool. Let's jump over to my favorite. This is I'm preferential to this. I love Lugia. It's my only graded card I have. I think I'm very
Lugia is
pleased
my
with.
favorite Pokemon, so
Yeah,
agree.
mine too. Mine too. Gen 1 and
Oh,
Gen
let's go.
2ers.
Let's
That's
go.
right. But yeah, no, I think Lugia has positioned itself really well. I think obviously the elephant in the room being Thorns and Miraidon. But where do you pick this? I think it's still, as much as I want to believe it's an A tier, I think B. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on Lugia,
I
where it
think it's
belongs.
definitely A tier, right
Okay.
right below Charizard, if not higher than Charizard. I would still put it
Okay.
below it though.
Yeah.
I think Lugia is just very, very good right now. It's just like it's similar to Ancient Box. It has like if you can just get past those like early turns, like you have
Exactly.
easily the most powerful deck.
Sure.
Just bar none because you have I mean it does everything you want to do. You have single prizers that can become zero prizers that can do infinite damage. Like that's just like super
So
broken.
broken. Yeah.
Accelerating 4 energy and 4 special energy into play every turn is just always going to be good. I was not high on the deck at all. Like I just was like, I'm never touching this deck, but I've actually like starting to consider it just because of how strong it is when it gets set up. And I think lists are
Yeah.
becoming a little more refined now. I really like the combination of like Cinchino and Weirdeer. I think that gives you a lot of flexibility. Yeah, so I think it's just one of those decks where on paper it has like pretty like favorable matchups into like kind of almost everything besides Miraidon and Thorns.
Yeah.
Like on paper, like you kind of just beat everything if you set up. So I think
Right.
that's really appealing. And I think it'll be a deck that a lot of people who maybe don't want to play Drago for whatever reason gravitate to either Lugia or Charizard. Like I think
Hmm.
those are easily the top three by like a pretty long shot. And I would say for that reason, I mean, you have Iron Hands, you have one shot potential. You can like if
Yeah.
it was just guys taking big one hit KOs, that wouldn't be enough. But the fact you have access to Iron Hands is really crazy. So
Hmm.
I would say that that is another 14% deck.
Cool. Right
13
on.
through 15. I'd say
Yeah.
Charizard 13 through 15, but yeah, let's say
Yeah.
14.
Cool. Yeah.
And I like
Maybe
that
middle way.
Lugia, a few lists from Worlds included Nest Ball just to try
Yeah,
to
for sure.
Yeah.
maximize like the consistency of getting starts going. And
Yeah.
Legacy Energy is just one of the better ace specs. It's obviously not the best, but it is just wild
Yeah.
to be
Hmm.
able to do that. We're
Yeah.
I guess for that just because like I've kind of always kind of liked Lugia in this format as well too because of the legacy energy effect. But where do we end up on the Mincino and Cincino? Is it like a 2-2 line? We saw Rahul play just 1-1. We saw Consta play a 2-2. Where do you think, Jesse, kind of those, especially if there's going to be a bigger, and obviously as we predicted, Charizard kind of making a little bit of a better comeback than Worlds. Like you kind of have to have a way to be able to one shot something with a single prizer. Do you think it's like a 2-2 line? You think or
Yeah, I kind of like what Rahul was doing, like with some of his basics. Like I like that. I like that
okay?
he played the two nest ball in combination
Yeah.
with Squawkabilly and Pheasantipity. It gives you a lot of like onboard draw, like to really make sure you can set up and draw into those bosses.
Yeah.
And but I think my favorite list from Worlds is probably Consta's. He
Yeah.
got
Okay,
top
that's the one I was
16,
just looking at. Yep.
and it's just really
Hmm.
clean. It's really straightforward. I think the 2-2 Cinchino and Weirdeer is like a good combination because you can't always get the Minchino down early, and when you can't, you still have that one shot potential with the Weird Ear.
Hmm.
It does
Exactly.
mean that you have to play. So it's kind of like, do you play 3-3 Cinchino, or do you cut 1-1 and play Weird Ear plus another energy, like plus force
Yeah.
double
Sure.
turbo?
Yeah. You got to
Is
play
kind
that
of
four
what you do.
TT for sure.
Yeah, because double
Yeah.
turbo is plus 60 for that, so you really need
Yep.
that extra energy. So it's kind of
Hmm.
like personal preference. But I personally like the flexibility of the Weird Ear for
Okay.
Yeah.
for like matchups like Reggie Drago because
Hmm.
like against Reggie Drago, they can like Halucha chase down like your Cinchinos, and if you
Exactly.
can never get a Cinchino out, then you just can't one shot them, and it feels horrible. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
uh, so
Forces you to
yeah,
have to gust around those big boys too. If
yeah.
you
So I think the Weird Ear is really good for sure. Oh, sorry, continue. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. No,
Oh, okay.
it's echoing that. Cool.
Yeah.
And lastly, I know I want to make sure we're cognizant of your time too. I think the rest of
Oh, you're good.
these, let's talk through Iron Thorns real quick too. I
Yep.
think that's obviously slightly under the radar, but where do you put Iron Thorns in this new Baltimore meta?
Yeah, I can
I,
only see some people picking it up for sure. But I don't know. It's hard. Kind of like the rest of these decks. I'm kind of like not sure. They kind of just all jumbled together in my head.
yeah.
Uh, I could see Iron Thorns maybe being one of the more popular out of these though, just because it did win Worlds, and some people might just be like, I want to play the Worlds winning deck. I mean, it
Hmm.
won Worlds. Like how much more proven can a deck get? But I
Yeah.
think like most people with like a metagame sense kind of know like you don't usually want to play the deck that just won, especially
Right.
a deck like Thorns that like you can just like Lugia, for example, you can play like a 1 card counter to it that doesn't necessarily mean you win against it. It just means you have
Right.
a
Right.
shot.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. Thorns, I would say Thorns is, I don't know. I still put Thorns in
You
B
still
tier
put it in B
personally.
tier? Okay.
Yeah, I would
Interesting.
maybe put it above Miraidon personally,
Okay.
just because like I don't think it's that much worse positioned. But I would still say Thorns is like a I don't know, 3% deck, 2, 3.
Yeah,
You
we'll
just
call
put
it
3. How
3.
much percent do we have to work with?
We've got
We're at
25%
75
left.
total.
Yeah.
Yeah,
25.
yeah.
Yeah, so kind of like the rest of these, kind of the other category has always been
Yeah.
like the highest percentage because
Right.
there is just like a lot of other random stuff put
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
But yeah, I still see Thorns being really good. I mean, Reggie Draga is a fine matchup. Charizard's good, pretty solid, depending on the engine they play. If they play like Towards engine, it's definitely not good. But if they don't play like the Skwovet and the Bibarel, like I think that it's a pretty fine matchup. Lugia, obviously amazing. Ancient Box, very bad, but the Turbo decks I think are all pretty solid.
Mhm.
And I just think it's just a really disruptive deck. I mean, Judge and Path to the Peak is like a
Pretty
really
broken.
proven way to win, like
Yep.
has been for a long time. And you have the Path to the Peak with on an ability, so
Hmm.
like that
Yeah.
can just like win you games by itself. And if you're playing Fernando's list, you just flip enough heads, anything's possible. So
Got that
I'm
plot
maybe
armor.
rating it too high. Yeah, yeah, I'm maybe rating it too high, but I still think it's pretty good right now.
Cool. Any of these other ones you want to talk about? I know one of
Yeah,
the ones that I've seen more on the ladder lately, and I think it makes sense as to why with the rise of Charizard coming back up. I've seen Snorlax stall pop up, and I know it didn't do as well. And even we had some top testing groups on Snorlax at Worlds.
for
Um,
sure.
do you see it making a little bit of a sneaky run into day two, deep day
Uh,
two, or do we think it's just kind of
Maybe.
shut down a little bit more still?
I
People
guess
just
if
don't
you
want to
just
play it.
keep pairing against, I guess if you like maybe hit very, very heavily tech for Lugia and
Yeah.
then you just hit a bunch of Lugia and Charizard, I could see it. But I
Mhm.
feel like Snorlax is just horrible right now. Like it's just so bad. Like I don't
See,
know
do
why
you?
you would ever want to play that deck right now. It's just
We'll
I don't
put
know.
it
It
in
just
D
feels
because I don't like it either.
like
We're good.
I could see yeah, I think D is appropriate. I could see I could say it's throw it in C. I mean, it is just like
That's
you
too
can just like
generous.
win games on the spot sometimes. So I
Right.
could throw it at C.
All
It'll
right.
be at the bottom of C. We can put it there.
We'll be
It's not
generous
truly
there.
terrible. Like there's some decks on here that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, like a couple on here that we haven't talked about yet. But
Yeah.
I think
Which are
Snorlax, like
those?
if I would say Dragapult is awful, and
Put that down
I would
there.
say Lost Zone Box is awful, and Giratina. They're all
Rip.
horrible.
All horrible.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
those
You heard it
decks are
here
all bad.
first. Don't play it.
Yeah, Lost Zone Box, like I don't know, man. It's just like Reggie Drago eats you alive.
Yeah.
Charizard's never been that great. Lugia's never been great.
Yeah.
Ancient Box, no way. But I mean, again, if there's like big Lost Box heads out there, I could maybe see Giratina showing up because like you technically have the numbers to like deal with those top 3 decks. Like you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
Roxanne or Unfair Stamp plus Temple Lugia.
Hmm.
Charizard, you have Iron Leaves and one shot potential through the Hero's Cape.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Drago, like technically you can hit the 280, if they have maybe a slow start.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I would say both those decks are just kind of get eaten alive, and then always same as Gardevoir, the decks can just get Kyurem at any point, like Gust Cologne Kyurem at any point, and that just wins. And not to mention that you can use Kyurem itself if they have a Colress in the discard
Yeah.
pile. Like
Yep.
no,
For
yeah.
colorless, yeah.
For a second, I
Which
like
is pretty
early on in my
crazy.
world's testing. For early on in my world's testing, I was actually thinking maybe Kyurem wouldn't be like an auto include in Drago, just because it felt like it was too hard to pull off. Like, and when you did pull it off, you couldn't recover. But we found out through like smart use of your Drago V Star power, you can use it back to back turns, and sometimes just using it once at the end of the game is enough. So,
Hmm.
Yeah.
yeah, obviously like that. I think that Drago cementing itself with Kyurem is as the BDIF is made Gardevoir and these Lost Box decks just not very strong. I would put Gardevoir in the top of C though, because I do
Okay.
think like it is a functional deck. It is pretty consistent. Like it's one of the more consistent decks for sure. And you have a lot of outplay potential with Unfair Stamp. Unfair Stamp is the Pheasant Dippity's kind of another reason why Gardevoir hasn't been good, because like
Right.
your opponent just always has this like almost guaranteed like +3, which just
Exactly.
makes Iono and Stamp weaker.
Kind of
But I
silly,
mean, you
yeah.
do have plays you can make. I mean, Klefki is really, really good against these big turbo decks.
Yep.
Klefki is really, really strong for sure. So I could still see like I mean, if like Calvin Connor decided he would gonna play Gardevoir, he could probably go pretty far. At
He would
the
do
end of the
well.
day, it's kind of like what the best players decide to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just depends. But yeah. So we're getting these last two here. We
Yeah,
got
let's do
Lost
it.
Zone Box.
Yeah, we got Lost
This is
Box
like the
My
Charizard.
more
favorite.
Yeah.
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 This is the
Fabled
more
Guard. That's my
Where
favorite.
do we
Yeah.
yeah.
put
This
it?
is the more competitive Lost Box list. You could put it at the in between Gardevoir and Snorlax, I suppose. Um,
Okay.
and I think the reason for that is because just Radiant Charizard's really strong card,
Yeah.
and Blood Moon. It's kind of like you have
Mm-hmm.
two Radiant Charizards, so
Right.
you have that like quick response on these like big basic turbo decks, unlike Giratina, unlike Lost Zone, like normal Lost Zone box. I guess
Exactly.
normal
Yeah.
Lost Zone box you still have the Blood Moon, but the Charizard's like a single prize Blood
Just
Moon, so it's
exactly.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Immediately after Worlds, that felt really, really good because before the rise in Charizard started to come back, like you just would feast on everything. And I didn't play a single two prizer. It was just straight up a lot of Sableye, a lot of Cram, and a lot of Radiant Charizard. And you
yeah,
kind of
Two
just
of
hit
each of
hit
them.
yeah, you just kind of continue to this. Yeah, basically, you just kind of continue to mash and kind of make things happen. And then like the good old Crisis Punch for free to hit another
yeah,
280 with a Cramorant late game, like it
Yeah.
just felt really good. And then as Charizard and Ancient Box kind of started to get a little bit more popular, I'm like, okay, it's
yeah. I
not
mean,
as good immediately after like the world's ladder meta, as I call it, when it
yeah,
was basically all Moon and Marina.
right, yeah. I mean, I really like Marco's list from Worlds, Marco
Mhm.
Cifuentes
Yeah.
top 64 list.
Yep.
He it's just really heavy on the single prize stuff, like two Cram, two Sableye, and then
Yeah.
Seeker Box just seems like a really good card in the deck, just because it's like a fifth boss's order,
Yeah.
Right.
which is like really cool. It can just like get you like a Chorus, a Mirage Gate, like everything you need, the tool you need, and then a Temple against Lugia. Uh, and then
Yeah.
you do still have the two Sableye plus TM Devo against Charizard. And
Yep.
Right.
I don't think Charizards will be respecting that. So you definitely have win cons against that. And then you have also some protection against Lugia with I see Marco played a Spiritomb. So Spiritomb can
Yeah.
just put in a lot of
So
work
annoying.
against
It's so
against Charizard and Lugia.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I could definitely see someone making a deep run with this Lost Box Charizard deck. I think if you're gonna play like a single prize deck other than Ancient Box, this would definitely be the way to go for sure. It seems like a pretty solid deck. I've never been a big Lost Box guy myself, but I definitely see the appeal.
Yeah. Cool. And last but
But
not
then the
least,
last one,
Definitely.
Chimpao.
Yeah.
yeah, the last one, Chen Pao. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Chen Pao it's just not very well positioned, similar to Gardevoir. So I would maybe put it right below Gardevoir. Um, it's struggles against. I mean, Reggie Drago. It's just comes down to the coin flip.
Yeah.
And that never feels good. Because they just and even if you win the like at any point in the game, Drago can just go gust and KO both your back calibers. Or back caliber and the second Frigibacks you have down. So that just never feels good. Like when I was testing Drago, I would pair against Chimpao and I would be getting like blasted, and then like I would just have a turn where I would KO both their Bax Caliber pieces, and then I would just come back and win from there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you always have that play. But it is like I mean, if you win the coin flip, if you're really good, another thing is just a hard deck to play too. But if you're really confident with the deck, strong, you can definitely beat these like big basic decks.
Yeah.
But and Lugia has always been like a pretty good matchup. And then Charizard, obviously, that Charizard Rising is good for the deck. But
Yeah.
if people are going to be playing Hero's Cape, that's not good for the deck
No, it's not good
either
at all.
because basically need like all 8 energy to one shot Charizard. So
Yeah.
I guess you could play maybe like a Heroes or a Lost Vacuum or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely like it's fine deck. I think you naturally struggle against the turbo deck sometimes too.
Right.
You can just because they rush you down. But you are good against Thorns, good against Lugia, Charizard, Drago's a coin flip. So I mean, honestly, like I don't think it's like that crazy of a play. Honestly, like I've been thinking about it a little bit, but I definitely think it's still like joins Gardevoir in that like kind of like mediocre, like out of the previous best decks and formats, it's been like they're
Yeah.
definitely two of the more mediocre ones for sure.
they get to join the ranks of the has-beens for a little while down there in C tier.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
maybe they'll make a comeback, but I could definitely see
time will
Gardevoir making
tell.
a comeback next format, but I'm not too sure about Chien-Pao.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think, and yeah, I think lastly too, it's just I'm kind of curious to see what A specs come out. Like you mentioned, Heroescape. Obviously, that took down like about 150 person online tournament last night.
What did you said?
The Heroescape and Charizard, like that,
Oh
Oh
yeah.
took
yeah,
down
that makes
an
sense. That
online
makes sense.
event. So like I've just been kind of clicking through like the active limit list or like the most
Yeah.
recent, something
Yeah.
with triple figures, and just
Yep.
kind of looking at deck lists and seeing where A specs. Like I've been experimenting with Max Belt in Charizard just because in the response of going through and being able to take out a Charizard without a Heroescape, obviously, but 330 with Giratina V Star has felt like really good, where they felt like they had game, and then I attached that and won. It's just I'm just curious to see which that is the cool thing. Having not played in a previous format with the A specs, it is really cool of these Radiance one ofs and then these A specs. Like
Yeah,
they
they
do,
did a good job with them for sure. There's a lot of really good ones for sure.
Yeah.
yeah, and
Seriously.
like Secret Box is one of like the coolest cards ever
So
printed.
broken.
Of
I love
just
that card. Yeah.
discard these three cards and get literally everything besides a Pokemon. And that's when I was playing that too. I watched shout out to All Out Blitzel. He was playing it in a tournament, and so I watched his stream. And then he explained Secret Box, and I was like, okay, remove Prime Catcher and put in Secret Box, and then it has felt really good because you're just able to kind of get rid of what you don't need, and then goes, especially on that deck of being able to
In
sequence
which
out your
deck? In
turns
which deck?
in Sablezard, in
Yeah.
Oh,
Lost
okay,
Box
gotcha.
Sablezard.
Okay,
Yeah, I was playing Prime Catcher just because I grabbed my old list and just
sure. I mean, it makes
input what
sense.
I had, and
Yeah.
then I was watching his stream, and then he showcased it, and then he just talked about it for like 2 minutes during one of his turns. And I was like, I trust him because he's come out with some pretty good
Yeah,
deck
he's a good
ideas.
player for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna trust someone that's way better than me at this game, and it's felt pretty cool. But yeah, I'm always interested to see like just kind of that, as you said, because didn't you make a world's change like the morning of, or like the last
The
minute?
night before, yeah, I
Yeah,
added in the one of research. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and I think that in Raiden's always felt good. Where if
Yeah, having that
you could
like fixed
Iono and
supporter.
hitting that,
Yeah.
yeah, and just being able to dump and kind
It's
of
just another
regenerate
good
your hand.
supporter. Yeah, like I mean, Miraidon used to play like for research, so having
Right.
one never like feels horrible.
Yeah,
But yeah, when it comes to all these other decks here, we had like 25% left of the percentages. I don't know how I would divvy it up, but I would just say like between these last 7 decks plus any random stuff, that's where like the last 25% of the
Yeah.
meta
Yeah.
would be for sure.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think
for
it's
sure.
fair. Like the 3.2% range or something like that brings us home with
Yeah.
that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome. Sweet. Well, that was fun. That's the first time I've ever gotten to do tier list. I know you said it was the first for you as well. So
I
hopefully
don't
we
think
can.
I think I did one like back when I first joined Twitter because I just thought it was fun.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever like actually like done one, like, actually thought about it. But I feel pretty good about this list
Yeah.
oh,
It
for
looks
sure.
pretty solid. Looks pretty solid. I
Yeah.
love seeing Lugie up there at the top too. So
Heck yeah, yeah. Lugia
yeah.
is a threat for sure.
Fly high,
yeah,
baby.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, Aaron, I'll pass it back over to you. I know we'll have some updates in a minute too, but Jesse, I want to just thank you again for joining in. You don't have to stick around for the rest of it. Yeah, appreciate you jumping on, Aaron.
Yeah,
If you have anything
thanks
you
for
want to
having me
say,
so much. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
man.
I don't have much else. Thanks for having me again. It's always fun being on the PCS
Yeah,
podcast. Yeah, if you guys want to, if anybody listening wants to follow me, the only place you can really find me is on Twitter or X. My handle is Jesse Parker with no A in the Parker. So yeah, that's where you find me. I post my tournament results and just anything Pokemon related, so you can follow me there. And thanks for having me, guys.
yeah. It was a blast as always.
cool, cool.
Take
Peace
care,
out.
Jesse. Good luck at
See you,
Baltimore.
Jesse. Yeah,
Thank you.
see you, bud.
You too, Michael. Yeah,
All
see
right,
ya.
see ya.
And then for the PCS updates that we have, so did talk with Drew a little bit more. So we're in round 5, and we got 2 more after this, so we have total 7 because we did a round robin and we did hit a good amount of players. So everyone will play each other at least once, and then whoever is on top. Obviously, Carlos did finally get taken down, so he's at three
Oh,
and
there we
one,
go.
and that's who I get to play this week as well too. And we
Okay.
travel up north, so I'm hoping that maybe the internet can be stable enough for me to get in the games, and I will do my best to try to keep him pegged down. But we have round 5 this week. I'll put this in the Discord as well too. This is still going to be Shrouded Fable format, and
Yeah.
then I am okay with you obviously being a lead, and Drew was okay with as well. Is the last 2 weeks, because obviously we do have a pretty good contingent of going to Louisville. I did get. I appreciate everyone that reached out directly about the Airbnb situated, and we are situated now. So I feel good on that. That will be a cheap stay for all of us, especially with the Airbnb that we got. I'm really excited.
Yeah, it's
But
been
the
looks
last
cool.
2 weeks, I will allow it, and we will be in the Stellar Crown format. Um, so the ban list probably, I don't think I've really, when I've been keeping track, I don't really see anyone that's like banned the same archetype like twice.
Yeah.
Poor Drew isn't get to play his Turbo Roaring Moon because everyone bans it like that one time, and he hasn't hit anyone else quite yet to ban it a second time because no one else has really been sending them the deck list. But we will do our last 2 rounds in the Stellar Crown just because I want to try to get as much testing myself in that format. And obviously we have the new cards, right? You're going to want to experiment with the new toys at your feet. So
Yep.
I'm excited for that. We have, round 5 and then 2 more to go. And then we'll kick in. And I already have a really cool idea for the Stellar Crown kind of like format challenge, because I don't think we'll have a set coming. Well, no, we talked about Surgeon
Yes.
Sparks, but at least that's not like till November. So we're able
Yeah.
to establish it. And then
Yeah.
I sorted through a whole bunch of stuff for, I think, GLC. I think I can make like a GLC meta, like 20
That's cool.
card, not deck, but like a 20 card of like, hey, here's a whole bunch of GLC stables to the
Yeah.
winner.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll have to get really creative come November when Surging Sparks releases, because after Surging Sparks is
There's
when we're gonna have
uh,
another
no,
almost 6 month long meta. It's just like the Paradox Rift format that we had a couple
yeah.
last year that time. So not super stoked for that. I think Azul has made it quite obvious on the uncommon energy. Like, it kind of sucks. I think hopefully, Pokemon will do a little bit better over time. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how we end up doing that. I'm curious to see what you and Drew come up with in terms of what the challenge looks like for Surging Sparks.
Yeah, I think well, that one will have to be created. Maybe even the one that I had for Stellar Crown, maybe I table that one because I think that might be more fun for something that's a little bit more drawn out. And I think that would bring a lot of players that maybe got to play in a certain team challenge back in the day before those kind of went away because we had in-person tournaments come back. But that was a
Right.
really big scene in the online of, or even locals too, like you're able to play, but it's obviously done in the prior app. So have some unique ideas with that, but I'm just excited for the participation that we get. Uh, for other things PCS related, Michael should be getting a swag bag from me here. Hopefully tomorrow is what the tracking showed us, Tuesday.
Awesome.
So if you see Michael, obviously here or hear his voice, if you are, but maybe I would encourage everyone to maybe either one follow him on socials so you can see him, and then I sent out some PCS swag for him, so he'll be able to hand that
Yep.
out to anyone that's a fan. I actually, in terms of the Airbnb for Louisville and stuff like that, I had a lot of people that were like, "Yeah, I've been listening for 5 or 6 months," and I just apologized. I was like, "Oh, that's like right when I started to take over." So I appreciate them learning or being patient with me as I continue to try to um, find my voice and just get this a little bit more of a natural feeling thing. But I'm excited that one, we have that many followers and listeners that maybe weren't even in the Discord, and then we've had quite a few people join lately.
Yeah.
So I think that's fun, and like I said, I'm excited just to have a team of PCS people at Louisville, and we all go through. I know your plans obviously kind of fell out, so that's a bummer, but
Yeah.
I'm excited just to get in, that Thursday and start testing away and just kind of getting to see a little bit of the town before the actual event, which I think will
Yep.
help me
Yeah.
just kind of hone in that much more on a Saturday morning because I'm guessing it's going to be another 9 round day.
Yep. Yeah, and kind of what you were saying too. If you're listening to this and you do end up coming to Baltimore, I think we're leaving around like 9, so I'll be at the convention center most of the evening, hanging out
Nice.
with some friends and connecting too. So if you do see me there, I'll have some retro decks with me. I'll obviously have the PCS swag. So come say hey. Come introduce yourself too. Um, yeah, I'm still obviously quite new to the PCS community, so if I don't know you, I'll know you after Baltimore. So definitely don't be shy. I'm not a shy guy at all. So come talk. we'll hang out and play
That's my
some poke.
favorite thing about regionals is getting to
Yeah,
meet people that then
absolutely.
join the Discord or been like, hey, yeah, I've been listening. Or for me, obviously at NAIC, it was so new that I was like, hey, I'm just literally getting started. So the joke was always like, hey, push us over 200 listens. You could be
Yeah.
201. That was always kind of my joke. And now we're eclipsing that number pretty regularly.
Yeah,
And
we're almost consistently over 300 now, which is pretty rad.
yeah, which is crazy to think just in terms of basically, yeah, it was about 3 months ago was
Yeah,
NAIC and where we've come, obviously, and I have you to think
yeah.
that as well too, to kind of push us into the 21st century of social content of not only just audio. So,
Hey,
is there
I'm
any
all
more
for it.
plugs that you have for you specifically in Baltimore?
Yeah, no, again, just come find me. I know I'm looking forward to hopefully getting a new die. I've been rocking the Pikachu one with like the little Pikachu head and Pikachu tail,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
it's been really bad for me lately. And so I'm hoping that the PCS will bring me some good lucks with my coin flips in Baltimore. Maybe it'll bring you some good lucks too. So come find me on Friday before we get started. But yeah, no, looking forward to it. You can find me on Twitter. I know you'd mentioned that. You can find me at PTCG. I think my handle is on the screen as well too. So find me there. I'm always yapping, and like I think we've already said this earlier. I yap about football quite a bit, yap about life and my kids and all that good stuff too. So come find me. I love to talk to people.
Yeah, I sent a few different colors. NAIC people rated the pinks, so like we have
All right. The
two
pinks are
two
the
left.
better ones.
Apparently, when I
Okay, all
was,
right.
because like, shout out to Pokey Brews, he hooked me up with a bunch of the swag. So like, I would just
Yeah,
open the box. I'm like, hey, choose one or two of your, and there's just like pink, and I was like, all right.
all
So
right.
clearly, we might
Good to
need a
know.
reorder of those. But I sent a few different colors, and hopefully they bring you good luck and everyone else that we're to be playing a coin, something with a coin flip. So I
Mm-hmm.
do want to take a special thank you to all of our Patreon members. Again, they help continue to help fund the show as we continue to try to seek new avenues in what we have, and a lot of that goes right back into the prizing. I did put out a poll for those that are in Patreon. I had a few votes to go through of just what they're wanting out of the challenges and wins. And right now we had a tie between like actual like TCG accessories, so like sleeves, or like I could probably buy like a I saw Bone Box was coming out with like their newest one, so something like that would be kind of a cool giveaway. And then a few people still kind of like the like I just saved a bunch of like the rare cards of like your alt art or like a full art anything. So gonna still try to basically do what the people want us to do is kind of the name of this community. Is tell me what you guys want and then I'll figure out a way to get it to you. And I think like booster bundle I think was also up there as a popular choice to actually get some
Cool.
just packs to rip as well too. So we'll continue to do that. You can find us basically everywhere with PCS Pod. So X and Twitter for myself, it's just PCS underscore Pod. Twitch is PCS Podcast. We're still trying to figure out the exact way to do that. I would have loved to have done like the webcam, but I was not going to hit you up with like 5 minutes before
We'll
the
get
match
there.
to figure out that. Yeah, we'll get there one day. Patreon, patreon.com/PCS podcast. YouTube is pretty easy, youtube.com at the PCS podcast. And then obviously Michael had his socials. And we thank Jesse one more time for
Yeah,
joining.
awesome.
He has been a very busy man on the scene since Worlds, so I do really appreciate him making time. And hopefully, we're able to shed some light in the Baltimore meta. But
Yeah.
that's going to be everything that we have for tonight. Michael, I wish you and everyone else that's going to be in the Discord at Baltimore. I hope you guys represent strong and have one good opponents to play, and two can play fast and get some dubs and try to
That's
make
right.
that day too.
Day 2. It's coming. It's gonna happen.
All right.
Sweet. All
Thanks
right.
again, everyone, for listening. Have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
See you later. Peace.